There at Capitol Reef National Park, I was telling you about the rocks. They look a lot like a well thought out Japanese rock garden. Large, rounded black rocks, small, rounded black rocks, set alongside the green juniper trees and the carved sandstone. It's just so special. I tell you, I started to fall in love with the juniper tree there at Capitol Reef. I was just walking along, and all of a sudden the greenness of the green juniper tree just jumped out at me. I mean, don't you think that green is a very, very important color? It's the color of life. And so we can't just leave the definition of green up for grabs. It can't be ambiguous. It's got to be a distinctive color of green. And my vote for the color of green, the center of the spectrum of greenness, should be the greenness of a juniper tree. And let's be more specific. The greenness of a juniper tree in the middle of the summer, in the middle of Capitol Reef National Park, against the redness of the sandstone rock, through the eyes of a middle-class American who loves nature. How's that for more specific? But it's amazing to see those trees growing right in the surface of the rock. I mean, it's a dry, barren, arid land, and they're just growing, and their greenness is green. I had one of the best showers I've ever had there at Capitol Reef National Park. There was the waterfalls, and they had a sign there saying, "Beware, hidden rocks, dangerous undertow." And I needed to take a bath, so I went down there and walked up to the waterfalls. The water was only waist deep, and I stuck my hand into them, and I knew that if I tried to walk through those waterfalls, that it'd be like being pounded with wet salamis or something. But there was obviously space behind it. So I dove underneath the waterfalls and came up behind, and it was great back there. It was sandy bottom and just the back of the cliff, and looking up, you could see the sun just sparkling down through the water as it dropped over the edge. And there were other people came and would swim underneath and join me, or swim back out. It was fun, good time. I also picked some peaches right off the trees there up against the cliffs, and saw petroglyphs, paintings done by the early inhabitants of the area. Once again, the campsites were filled, so I decided I was going to try and find another campsite way off down the side of the park. I started driving out there, and it was dirt road, and it just started shaking the car to bits. Didn't know if it was going to hold together, and I came to a road sign that gave all kinds of names pointing in either direction, none of which I recognized, so I decided I better turn back. And along the side of the road, I saw a place where it looked like people had camped once before, and it was getting dark, and I just pulled over and once again slept in my car. But I had a great time that night, just laying out under the stars, and they were just as clear as it can be, without the interference of the city light, of course. And watched the satellites go over, and watched the meteorites, and I heard a meteorite for the very first time. And it was only until recently I was talking with my father, and he said that that's possible, that I could have heard a meteorite, because I heard this high-pitched humming right when I saw the meteorite appear, and it ended right when it disappeared, and I knew it wasn't a mosquito or something like that. Oh, I was laying there just enjoying the sight, and all of a sudden this big old bat just flew right across my face, gave me a real start, and I figured out that I was setting up this minor ecosystem there where I was laying there and the heat of my body attracted the mosquitoes and bugs, and the mosquitoes attracted the bat, which is where the harmony of it all broke down, because I was not attracted to the bat. Oh, but had to travel on. And from there I went to my favorite area, Arches National Park. That's where Edward Abbey was working for the longest time, there at that park as a park ranger, before it was made so accessible to the industrial tourist with all the paved roads that they put in. But I had to see the Delicate Arch. It is amazing. It is a beautiful, beautiful arch. There's all kinds of formations and arches there that have to be seen. Here's Edward Abbey's description of the Delicate Arch. He says, there are several ways of looking at the Delicate Arch, depending on your preconceptions. You may see the eroded remnant of a sandstone fin, a giant engagement ring cemented in rock, a bow-legged pair of petrified cowboy chaps, a triumphal arch for the procession of angels, an illogical geologic freak, a happening, a something that happened and will never happen quite that way again, a frame more significant than its picture, a simple monolith eaten away by weather and time and soon to disintegrate into the chaos of falling rock. Not surprisingly, there have been some, even the Park Service, who advocate spraying Delicate Arch with a fixture of some sort, Elmer's glue perhaps, or Lady Clairol spray net. There are the inevitable pious Midwesterners who climb a mile and a half under the desert sun to view Delicate Arch and find only God. And equally, students of geology who look at the arch see only the uniformity of nature. You may therefore find proof for or against his existence. Suit yourself. You may see a symbol, a sign, a fact, a thing without meaning, or a meaning which includes all things. Much the same could be said of the tamarisk down in the Grand Canyon, or the blue-black raven croaking on the cliff, or of your own body. The beauty of the Delicate Arch explains nothing, for each thing in its way, and true to its own character, is equally beautiful. That's Edward Abbey for you. But I was impressed again. You know, and it's not so much, when I'm thinking about it, it's not so much that the sandstone has any worth of its own. I mean, the sandstone didn't decide to become beautiful. It was at the right place at the right time, and the forces of wind and nature carved out its weaknesses and exposed something with beauty. In somewhat kind of the same way, we are lumps of clay in the hands of the Creator, and if we'll let Him, we just need to let those forces that He applies to our life work and carve out the weaknesses and leave something that will attract other people to the Creator. It really doesn't say much about the sandstone or the lump of clay or the human being. It does say something about the Creator. when I was out there at the Delicate Arts, the wind picked up and started blowing so hard. One of those things where you lean into the wind just to stand. And I knew that my tent was in trouble. I had secured it with a tarp and some ropes, but I hadn't put any stakes in it. Stakes to stake it down. And when I returned to my campsite, I could not see the tent. And here one of the poles had snapped. Two of the poles had remained connected and rigid, and it allowed the tent to hold flat. If that had not happened, I think that tent would have blown halfway across the desert. So, once again, yes, I slept in my car. But the rain was coming that night and didn't have a place to. I just needed to get away out of the weather because it was too early to go to sleep, and I drove into the town of Moab. All kinds of nice shops around there and friendly people to talk to. I stopped in at a rock shop and had a great conversation with these folks who had been to Alaska, and I from their descriptions of Alaska, I really want to go now. But we were standing there admiring a huge collection of Geiger counters from the uranium hunt, the mining for uranium in the area, and lamps and Jeep hydraulic jacks and a wide assortment of things like that, and rocks. Enjoyed talking with the store owners. I had a great chat with this one guy who was sold gold prospecting equipment, and we sat and talked for hours about the meaning of life. He had been through the war and been traumatized by that, and had become divorced and lost his wife and moved out here. And he was talking about how the desert and nature could heal anybody who was suffering with mental illness. And I think there's a lot to the healing that comes being out there in the wilderness, where you have to take care of yourself. You can't sit there and stew upon all your troubles. Anyway, I'd seen a cafe and I was wanting to visit it anyway, and this thunderstorm was just coming up. Boy. So I walked in and ordered myself some nice, wholesome health food. No meat. And lo and behold, this young lady with a guitar started singing. Oh my goodness, was she singing great folk songs. And I was just having the time of my life, because outside the thunder was rolling and cracking and booming, and inside it was warm and had hot coffee and good folk music in this nice little atmosphere. And so I went over closer to join this other gentleman who was sitting there singing along, and she had sung a song that I knew and could sing along with. And this guy was interesting because he would clap and cheer every time the thunder rolled and start imitating the thunder sounds himself. Let me see if I can't play that song, the one song for you that I heard her play there.
I live where the bottles break, Black Tom still comes back for more. I live where the bottles break, the Black Tom still comes back. I live where the neighbors yell and their music comes up through the floor. I live where the neighbors yell and their music wakes me up. Life beyond the playground fence, serious as basketball. Life beyond the playground fence is serious. For blocks from the steel mill blast, I paid my claim upon the wall. 4 blocks from the steel mill blast, I paid my claim. From my end of the south side drag, it's a common thought to call the cops. Further west it's been gentrified, they turned back of bars into flower shops. I kinda miss those Harley guys who rarely did a body harm. Mostly liked to drink and shout, flash the pictures on their arms. Happens when the money comes, the wild and poor get pushed aside. Happens when the money comes, the poor get pushed. Buyers come from somewhere else, they raise the rent so you can't hide. Buyers come from out of state, they raise the rent. Buy low, sell high, you get rich and you still die. Money talks, people jump, ask how high, low, like Donald, what's his name? Who cares? I don't wanna know what his girlfriend doesn't wear. It's a shame that the people that work wanna hear about this kind of jerk. People aren't saints, no people just are. They wanna feel like they count, they wanna ride in their own car. People aren't saints, no people just are. They wanna feel like they count, they wanna ride in their own car. I just wanna make enough to buy this town and keep it rough. I just wanna make enough to buy this town. Buy low, sell high, you get rich and you still die. Money talks and people jump, ask how high, low, like Donald, what's his name? I live where the bottles break, the black top still comes back for more. I live where the bottles break, the black top still comes back. I live where neighbors yell and the music comes up through the floor. I live where neighbors yell and their music wakes me up. Life beyond the playground fence, serious as basketball. Life beyond the playground fences, serious, serious.
One day I was there in Arches National Park. I was enjoying all these formations, and another storm was coming up. This time the wind wasn't blowing as hard and the storm was far off, and I could smell the smell of rain coming. And it triggered something from my childhood, growing up on the deserts there in the Kalahari. I think there's something about rain in the desert that really stirs me. And that smell was one I remembered from way back then, bringing life to the dryness, bringing hope to the juniper tree. It's a wonderful smell, something like a herbal tea with some dirt in it, with the sage and other fragrances floating through with a little bit of ozone in there. And I just had a thought that just struck me, that was that if hope had a smell, this is what it would smell like. It would smell like rain, the coming rain in a desert. The water is the hope of life for the desert. For the human being, hope is what sustains us and keeps us going. So now I know what hope smells like. I moved on from Arches National Park and went to an area called Canyonlands National Park. And that was my last major excursion into the backcountry. Since my pole on my tent was broken, I had to find one place and set up and then make day trips from that one location. And the location that I got to was an open area surrounded by these pillars of stone, rounded off at the top, many of them domed. Ugh, just amazing to see how they stood, sort of like sentinels all the way around this area of sage, flat area of sage, and then how they would be silhouetted when the sun would go down at night. Right there in the cliffs where I had my tent set up were the remains of where the cowboys had set up camp back when they were in the area bringing their cattle in there to graze. I went to hike to a place called Druid Arch. It's a long, hard hike, but it was really worth it because this arch was different than anything I'd ever seen. It was, well, it looked like it had been made by the same people who made Stonehenge. Very angular. And I got into a pattern here in Canyonlands where I would get up with the sun and get some breakfast, usually left over from supper before, and then hike while it was cool in the morning. Get to the place where I was going, where in this case was Druid Arch, and then I would find some shelter. At Druid Arch I found a juniper tree and rested in the shade most of the day long, just read and read. At one point I had a real close encounter with a hummingbird. I'd been hearing and seeing them at a distance quite often, and I was laying there just about falling asleep, and this loud buzzing came right at me, and I jumped, and the hummingbird took off again. Well, about an hour later, I heard the same sound, and here it came back, and I knew what it was this time, so I laid still, and the hummingbird came right in under the tree and was hovering maybe 2 feet from my face, and I could see, the sparkle in his beady black eyes and the individual feathers on his chest. Just a real special moment. Then in the evening I would hike back. Hopefully I had found water during my hike, and I'd hike back carrying that water and then lay out under the stars. Until I started falling asleep and then go back to the tent. The next day I hiked to a place called The Joint, which was a very narrow joint between two huge slabs of sandstone. And we're talking narrow. This is like shoulder width. Really interesting because it's just a sandy pathway in between these sheer, straight up walls of sandstone. And at certain places it was carved out wider at the bottom, and it had great acoustics again. So I sat in there for the longest time playing my recorder. So cool in there, temperature-wise. In some places, the water had eroded on either side of a huge slab of sandstone, and it felt very much like standing at the bow of a big ship that's on dry dock, because it'd be narrow at the bottom and then continue to widen until it would be looming up over your head. There again, every once in a while you'd see a juniper tree that would be just growing right out of the rock, and sometimes they would be totally dead, but they're so tenacious and tough. The bark is so tough that they'll stay standing for a long, long time, and even in their dried up, dead state, they're beautiful in their own way. I was feeling like I could relate to the juniper tree as a symbol of life in the face of strife. Edward Abbey talks about the desert a lot in his book, of course, and how, when I was out there in Glacier National Park, life was so abundant. It was green and growing everywhere, all crowded in on top of each other. But here in the desert, each living thing needed its own space, and in that way it kind of stands out. Here's a little part I'll read about out of his book. The wind will not stop. Gusts of sand swirl before me, stinging my face. But there is still too much to see and marvel at. The world very much alive in the bright light and wind, exultant with the fever of spring and the delight of morning. Strolling on, it seems to me that the strangeness and wonder of existence are emphasized here in the desert by the comparative sparsity of the flora and fauna. Life not crowded upon life as in other places, but scattered abroad in sparseness and simplicity, with a generous gift of space for each herb and brush and tree, each stem of grass, so that the living organism stands out bold and brave and vivid against the lifeless sand and barren rock. The extreme clarity of desert light is equaled by the extreme individualism of the desert life forms. Love flowers best in openness and freedom. That even the soil was alive there. It was called a microbiotic crust, and every time it rained, this kind of like a bacteria would send out its filaments into the soil and create a black crustiness that would hold the sand in place so that the plants could grow there, and provide nutrients as well. So you had to watch where you're going to step, because you could crunch the crust and it would not recover quickly. But life is just such an amazing thing. So intricate, so abundant everywhere. You think of the bigness of the earth and the intricacy of life, it makes you want to say, what is man that thou art mindful of him? To the Creator God. And that's something that Ann Dillard in her book Pilgrim at Tinker Creek was thinking about. She says, what is man that thou art mindful of him? This is where the great modern religions are so unthinkably radical, the love of God. For we can see that we are as many as the leaves of trees. But it could be that our faithlessness is a cowering cowardice, born of our very smallness, a massive failure of imagination. Certainly nature seems to exult in abounding radicality, extremism, anarchy. If we were to judge nature by its common sense or livelihood, we wouldn't believe that the world existed. In nature, improbabilities are the stock in trade. The whole creation is one lunatic fringe. If creation had been up to me, I'm sure I wouldn't have had the imagination or courage to do more than shape a single reasonably sized atom, smooth as a snowball, and let it go at that. No claims of any and all revelations could be so far-fetched as a single giraffe. The question from agnosticism is, who turned on the lights? The question from faith is, whatever for? Thoreau climbs Mount Katahdin and gives vent to almost outraged sense of the reality of things in this world. I fear bodies, I tremble to meet them. What is this Titan that is possession of me? Talk of mysteries. Think of our life in nature, daily to be shown matter and to come in contact with it, rocks and trees and wind on our cheeks, the solid earth, the actual world, the common sense, contact. Who are we? Where are we? Lord God of gods, the Lord God of gods, he knoweth. Sir James Jeans, British astronomer and physicist, suggested that the universe was beginning to look more like a great thought than a great machine. Humanists seized upon the expression, but it was hardly news. We knew looking around that a thought branches and leaves. A tree comes to a conclusion. But the question of who is thinking the thought is more fruitful than the question of who made the machine. For a machinist can, of course, wash his hands and leave. And his simple machine still burns, still hums. But if a thinker's attention strays for a minute, his simplest thought ceases altogether. And as I have stressed, the place where we so incontrovertibly find ourselves, whether thought or machine, is not at the least in any way simple. And that's so true, isn't it? Such intricacy out there. All these carved rocks and individual plants. All the lizards crawling around on them. Diversity, intricacy, everywhere. It seems that God is preserving our free will by veiling himself with this intricate diverse profusion of forms and colors. And all I ask for is hope, like the juniper tree, just enough to survive. You know, I talks in the scriptures about the tree planted by the living water. Of course it's going to prosper if it's planted by the water all the time. But there's a lot of us out here who feel like we're planted in a desert. And we need hope. Just a thunder shower every once in a while to refresh these roots and keep them from getting bitter. Life in the face of strife. After I'd finished my hiking there in Canyonlands, it was time to head back home. That's what we'll call it, home. Didn't quite feel like home yet. But I had a long, hard, hot drive, no air conditioning, down to Carlsbad National Park. And there at Carlsbad was refreshing in that down there in the cave, that massive, massive cave, I could be in the cool temperature down there and enjoy the formations. Such massive stalactites and stalagmites and halactites. Do you know what halactites are? I like them because they don't seem to follow the rules. The stalactites go down and the stalagmites go up, but the halactites go any which direction they feel like going. Some places there look like a whole network of halactites crisscrossing and weaving together across the ceiling. An amazing, amazing sight. So I meandered through the accessible parts of that cave. And that evening, I enjoyed sitting and listening to talk about bats. I had thought that bats operated solely, or at least mostly, by their sonar. And I came to learn that most of them use their sonar only to catch prey at times, but they do operate with their eyes. I always thought before that the bats are so courageous to fly like that with only the sound waves bouncing off the objects. To me, the sound waves would seem so slow in comparison to the speed of light, and that I would be bouncing off the thing that I was trying to hear before I heard it coming my way. I wondered if bats had peripheral hearing, but now I know that that's not the case, and that it actually uses a lot of their energy to use their sonar. And I found that very few people have been bitten by vampire bats, but when they do get bitten, it's usually on their toe, because the vampire bat will land and then walk over to somebody who's sleeping outdoors and take a bite of whatever is exposed, which is usually, I guess, the big toe. But I was sitting in a very good spot to see the bats come out of the cave, and I believe I was the first. But I tell you what, a cloud of bats, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of bats forming a cloud, a stream, a dark stream of bats headed toward the horizon, out hunting, ridding the air of many, many tons of mosquitoes, each one eating about a third of its body weight in bugs. So that's okay with me. And again, then in that night, I tried driving in the cool of the night as best I could, with a little help from some caffeine. But I tell you, I think one of the hardest things I did this trip was just that long haul from Carlsbad Caverns down through Texas. Oh my, just seemed to go on and on and on. I must have swerved around 3 or 4 skunks and 1 porcupine. And there were so many deer alongside the road at night, but fortunately none decided to bolt in front of my car or anything like that. Don't know how good my response time would have been at that point. I had seen so much of man's folly over the previous 2 years that it was very important for me to see God's creation. And he is hidden. But Meister Eckhart said God is like a person who clears his throat while hiding, and so gives himself away. And I think I was out there and I was still enough that I heard God clear his throat. I'm grateful for the opportunity, the privilege of doing that. And I so many times wished I could have shared it with you all. But I was able to see that some of his bigness, his awesomeness, I think, just through the signs that the clues that he drops about in his creation. I think most of us live the majority of our lives indoors, and we've just got to get outside. If I ever have another chance, I will be going back to Moab, maybe to Bryce Canyon. Bryce was named after a man, the man, Bryce. He was a Mormon pioneer, and the only thing he had to say was about the canyon was, it's a heck of a place to lose a cow. But it's a great place to get lost as a human being and find other things. But there's nothing like walking through a narrow slot canyon that's been carved out by the wind and the rain and the water. It's smooth in the sides of the walls, and got some carved out concave places, little nooks and crannies, I like to call them, for your imagination to trickle through. Just inspires all kinds of imaginings.